We are now recording on the 4th of September 2025, and before all of us blink, South Africa will be in its latest local government election period towards the end of 2026, possibly early 2027, but we're looking at late 2026, early 2027. So we think it's important to stay on top of even seemingly minute political developments, see how they ripple through South Africa's very competitive local municipal politics as the country heads towards its next local government elections. Now, recent Democratic Alliance polling, which the DA is going to conduct every 2 weeks in the lead up to those local government elections on a sort of rolling basis, that polling found the ANC's fortunes declining even more rapidly, I think, than the party themselves, the ANC themselves, realized and would want to admit. But one ANC source that spoke to Business Day recently in the last 2 weeks, they confirmed that the DA polling maybe is overestimating ANC support in Hattingh specifically. So just a quick snapshot, a quick mention, the DA polling has the ANC below 20% in Johannesburg, in the Johannesburg metro specifically, and also trending downwards in both Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, and the DA themselves tracking up, so around 40%. If not higher. So we're going to use that as our launching point. We're going to discuss a few things around local politics in South Africa. And joining us is Mr. Sean McLaughlin. Sean, thank you very much for your time, your first appearance here on the CRA's YouTube channel. I'm sure the first of very many over the next year or so. You've written for publications such as Biz News, the Free Market Foundation, the Daily Friend, and others. So we're very keen to get your insights in terms of how things are shaking out to sort of help us cut through the noise and identify where things could be going. So just to start off with, to really grill you and put you on the spot here, do you think the DA poll, the findings, we're not going to discuss the methodology and anything like that, but do you think it's plausible that the ANC could be below 20% in the Gauteng metros, specifically in Johannesburg?
Absolutely. The DA, the Democratic Alliance, is well known to have very formidable, very accurate polling machine, internal research team, and internal data analytics, and so on. And from my understanding as well, their polling is some of the most accurate in the country, and is done over a very long period of time. That is, of course, taken in the context of the time and of any number. So this is a snapshot of how it is at the time that poll was taken. So, you're still a year out from the election, or possibly quite a lot more than that. And it's between elections. So that's with the caveat that the ANC generally goes down between elections, and the DA often goes up between elections. So the question for the DA from a risk perspective will be, can they maintain that momentum? Can they sustain that speed and delivery going into the local government elections, which are as far away as early 2027? So yes, I think the DA's numbers are very credible when they're taken in their context. Now, from a sort of risk perspective, local government coalitions in South Africa, very complicated things. But in a lot of cases where centrist parties, or centrist or liberal or centre-right parties, form a coalition and have the numbers, that's to say, collectively they have 51% or more, they tend to do very well, and those coalitions tend to hold very well. A very good example of that is Umlatuze in KwaZulu-Natal in Richards Bay, in the KwaZulu-Natal province, predominantly an Inkatha IFP-led municipality with support from the Democratic Alliance. Now, that municipality has won awards and so on for its improvement in governance metrics. So that's to be commended. Those two parties working very well together for governance improvements. That's you can't argue with that. You can't really fault that. The problem seems to come when these parties don't have the numbers. And the DA and the Freedom Front and Inkatha Freedom Party, if they collectively get to 49%, and they need to rely on very, very small parties to pass budgets and to elect the mayor or whatever the case may be. That's when these local government coalitions become very, very shaky. So if the DA were to win in Johannesburg, let's say win, what does win mean in South African local government context? Is it the largest party? Is it 45%? Is it 51%? The DA did well in 2016 in Johannesburg. I think they got 38%. Then again, you can still be one of the largest parties or the largest party, but if you don't have credible, reliable coalition partners, you might find yourself with a minority government yet again, and every day will be a battle to keep things together. And so from a DA perspective, if you're sort of inclined to want to see the DA govern Johannesburg, you would want to see the DA, in my view, on a minimum of 42. Because that is what they got originally in Cape Town in 2006. Remember, Cape Town coalition, the DA's first shot at Cape Town wasn't an outright majority either, and it was a 6 or 8 party coalition which held against the odds for the full term. So I think a similar thing could play out in Johannesburg. I think 42 would be the absolute minimum. Anything less than that, and it'd be looking like a minority government. And could Helen Zille, putting her hat in the ring, bump the numbers up to 45 or 47, maybe flirting with that? Very, very possible. We'll have to see. But again, these polls are snapshots. So you would want, if you did want to see the DA in government in Johannesburg, you would probably want to see a poll that puts DA on high 40s or maybe even into the 50s to account for the time and the snapshot and the margin of error. So then if it does come down, then it would be at sort of 45 or so, and you would have your broad sort of centre-right coalition in government.
Sean, just a question there, sort of linked to polling versus actual election results. Another factor that I think we should just tease out a bit is voter turnout, and where, high or lower voter turnout, which parties that might benefit. So in 2021, in our previous local government, our most recent local government elections, I mean, during COVID and hard lockdowns, that would have impacted voter participation. But since the dawn of democracy in South Africa, and all our elections, we've had declining voter participation across the board. Anything you want to share, just quickly on voter participation, and for which party or parties, the big three, maybe the big four, the big five now, we should include the IFP as well. Does lower turnout, is it worse potentially for their results?
Yeah, that's a big question. I guess it is a sign that there's decreasing faith generally in the political system, and the whole political system is in fact a minority pursuit. So I think in the national provincial elections last year in 24, not mistaken, voter turnout was about 56 or 58% of the registered voters. Now, of eligible adults, I think that was about 42%. So you're only getting 4 in every 10 eligible adults are actually voting. So that's a very small number. So it is a minority. Yeah, it is a minority pursuit. I think that could probably help the DA. The DA has a well-known concept, a well-known term of differential turnout. So they have it's able to mobilize its base better. It's able to knock on doors, get people out to the voting stations. So its actual final number in a council or a province or nationally might actually be, proportionally comparatively higher than the actual number of adults that voted for them in that area. So, and yeah, I guess they'll be hoping that is a factor going into these local government elections, that the DA can really mobilize its base, the DA can really go after it and bump the numbers up higher than they would have been. The ANC has, I think that would probably hurt the ANC. There's probably a very large proportion of their voters that would stay away in that case. I'm not aware. I haven't looked at that number exactly, but I would guess that the majority of stay away voters are probably ANC voters.
If we talk about factors motivating bases of parties, but then also bringing in undecided voters, maybe especially those ANC voters who are fast becoming more and more disillusioned, more and more voters becoming more and more disillusioned with the ANC or former supporters of the party. One of those we've touched on is very likely that Helen Zille will be the DA's mayoral candidate in Johannesburg. Are there any sort of risk points or issues that you foresee in DA campaigning, maybe what the opposition can use against the party? So to poke a bit of a hole or holes where we can in the theory that it's just now guaranteed ANC decline and just inexorable DA rise. I think often when one sort of falls into some of that analysis, it could be too tempting and too easy. That's why I'm putting you especially, but me as well, trying to put us both on the spot here in terms of what could there be, despite the Zille candidacy, that doesn't push the DA to 40, 45, 47%?
That's a good question. That's a very specific question. I think so. The DA was polling in Johannesburg on about 33% in April. That was before Helen Zille put her hat in the ring or announced that she was considering putting her hat in the ring, which is a huge political chess move by the Democratic Alliance to send your biggest heavyweight to the capital city. The DA will be hoping that will bring them up into 35, 38, a couple of high-profile endorsements, 40, 41, 42, and good campaign energy in the campaign, that could lift up to 45 and so on. That all is a possibility. I think to answer your question specifically, one thing that could potentially stall that rise is if the ANC is able to bring about any kind of turnaround in the city of Johannesburg governance. And I think that they will pull out all the stumps to try and do that. Now, the one issue, of course, is water, and you'll know more about this than me. But water issues and water infrastructure issues are very difficult to fix. Pipes go under the ground. You have to dig up the ground. Pipes go multi-jurisdictional and so on. So this stuff is very difficult. But like all politics, you don't actually have to have fixed it. You have to be seen to be fixing it or be seen to be trying to fix it. And especially, a lot of those sort of topical things are quite easy to do. And topical in inverted commas, fixing streetlights, fixing road markings, trying to fix the water system. So that could puncture the Zille DA campaign quite significantly. And I don't know, that might be harder to do in the city of Johannesburg because of the structure of the city of Johannesburg Council and a lot of the semi-privatized sort of entities. It might be harder to get agreement, might be harder to do things in the same way that they've done to a certain extent in Durban at eThekwini. So I think that is a big thing. Conversely, if you have a huge water crisis you already have a water crisis, but if that exacerbates, and the city effectively runs out of water and Johannesburg might need to be evacuated. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point. But that would obviously, might potentially end any credibility the ANC ever had in Johannesburg. Yeah.
I'll in classic conference or event speak, when someone says, this is more of a statement than a question, more of a comment than a question. I'll just add a last thought on that. I think part of what's going on with the national dialogue and the national convention is, despite the nice words by President Ramaphosa and others, this is yet another attempt by the ANC through gaining funding through other means, to go into local municipalities, wards, communities in the lead up to the local government election, so they can use the national dialogue and those platforms to try and reconnect with their voters. I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. I don't suspect so, but I think that's what's really driving this national dialogue attempt, is to get to the people again, as it were. I don't know if you want to shoot holes in my theory, maybe, or.
Well, I think it could work against them. I think I heard Dr. Franz Cronier on Mike Sham's State of the Nation recently, saying exactly this, that his organization, or an organization that he was involved with, had polled this, and voters deep in Soweto, astute, ordinary people in the street, don't want the ANC to talk about these things. And one of their biggest issues and grievances was precisely, in fact, that the ANC just talks about these things and doesn't actually do anything about it. And to have people screaming at the screen, screaming at a microphone for hours about the problems that they're going through, and they don't have water and they don't have a job and so on, that could potentially backfire very badly in against the ANC, and in fact actually make the DA look quite astute for not participating in this national talk shop. So that's also a possibility.
For anyone who hasn't yet followed the National Dialogue account on X, I don't recommend following them, because then you give them another follower, but just to go and check it out sometime, because the attempts at sort of credibility and looking like they're taking it seriously, you can see they're really scraping the barrel. But Sean, I think sort of final main talking point, I'm going to ask you a bit about 2029. So we're all very focused on next year, how that shakes out, implications for the GNU, et cetera, but towards 2029, if we can ask you to take out your crystal ball, as it were, what are you seeing in terms of some of the trends, specifically in KwaZulu-Natal? We've got the provincial government of unity that has now held for more than a year, just held out the Umkhonto we Sizwe party that alone got 45% in KZN. So it was maybe by necessity is the mother of all invention, of all desperation, of all innovation, etc., etc. But it seems to be holding. So what can you tell us, looking towards a bit longer term in South African politics?
South Africans love predictions. No, I'm kidding. It's a volatile environment. Yeah.
We're going to link to this discussion many times over the next 4 years. So here we go.
Yeah, this is the most extraordinary thing. So in 2024, national and provincial elections, you have this ANC breakaway party of former President Jacob Zuma, starts his own party called Umkhonto we Sizwe, obviously with a stronghold in the KwaZulu-Natal province, South Africa's second biggest province by population and GDP, if I'm not mistaken. So it's in a very important place. Obviously, the main city is Durban and so on. So this Umkhonto we Sizwe party does exceptionally well in the provincial election and gains 45% of the provincial vote, just shy of an outright majority in the province. The EFF, some might say an ideological ally, gets 2%, razor thin margins, talking about small margins in politics, my goodness. The two of them, 47%, collectively not enough for an outright majority to govern KwaZulu-Natal. The broader opposition was able, therefore, to deny MK and EFF governance of KwaZulu-Natal. So that coalition consists of four parties: the Inkatha Freedom Party at 18%, the ANC at 16.9, 17%, the DA at 13.5%, and a very small party, a breakaway of the Inkatha Freedom Party called the National Freedom Party, who gained 0.5%. Now, collectively, these four parties have 51% of the seats in the KwaZulu-Natal provincial legislature, 41 seats out of 80. Now, some people are saying that Umkhonto we Sizwe will go for it and will win an outright majority in KZN come the next provincial election in 2029. Now, I'm skeptical about that. I think it's a possibility, and businesses should prepare for potential implications of that. But whatever you think of Mkhonto wa Sizwe, that specific party doesn't have on the ground organizational structure and machine. So any party that espouses that, it's hard to see how that survives into the longer term. Instead, I have a theory that you might have a very coherent provincial coalition between the Inkatha Freedom Party and the Democratic Alliance. So Inkatha and DA. Now, between them, they only need to find 17% or 18% for an outright majority to knock the ANC out and get 51% and get over the line. Now, with potentially the collapse of or the stagnation of MK, Inkatha stands to do very well, and a lot of those votes stand to go to Inkatha. The ANC sort of stands a bit indistinguishable, kind of in the province. Kind of, how are you distinguishing yourself from Inkatha, from MK? And the DA, if they manage to get hold the mayoral chin in a coherent coalition of some of the cities in that province come the next local government election. So I'm thinking Msunduzi, Pietermaritzburg, and Durban, eThekwini. That could potentially boost the DA's numbers in KZN by 5 or 10%. And before you know it, between the two of them, the DA and Inkatha have enough to get over the line in 2029. Now, the DA have had big hopes for KZN before. They haven't really materialized. But it could be very different if they are seen to be performing well at a local government level. Yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on. I guess provincial polling, you from a risk perspective, you could see and track these things. The Social Research Foundation polled in KwaZulu-Natal leading into 2024. So if you were to see Inkatha on 30, the DA on 20, something like that probably could be enough. So that's potentially a good outcome for KwaZulu-Natal based on those two parties' governance records.
Absolutely. And given there's so much attention always on Gauteng and the Western Cape and the growth and the investment in those two provinces, I think KwaZulu-Natal, in many ways, it flies under the radar until things, there's a bit of a conflagration, unfortunately. But if things get right from a sort of governance point of view in KZN, to talk about driving South Africa's overall growth, that's one province I think that has really criminally underperformed in its economic growth investment potential. So if we can see some kind of positive stability in its politics, some reforms going, you could see over the medium to long term lots of potential in that one.
And from a risk perspective, that coalition currently in KZN, there's the National Freedom Party with one seat. But think about it, that's if they switch sides to MK and EFF, that's still not enough. That's still actually only 40 seats. So you need 41 in past budgets and so on, I believe. So Inkatha is very unlikely to do it. The DA won't do it. So the only one that could actually flip that provincial coalition is probably the ANC. So I guess from a risk perspective, that would be one to keep an eye on.
And given that parties many domestic and global challenges, I don't see that they've got their eye on the ball enough to get things right in KZN, especially if you consider the former Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, a close ally of President Ramaphosa, very much in the running, I think, towards the 2027 ANC conference, elective conference, given that his career seems to have been scuppered now on the back of Lieutenant General Mkunazi's revelations. That, again, his background in KwaZulu-Natal, his influence, his support there, should he now be removed from the sort of playing table, the chessboard, the continued weakening of the ANC, I think, is almost guaranteed.
And for the ANC in KZN, it is about survival. They went from, I can't remember the 2019 number exactly, but I believe it was well over 50. They went from over 50% of majority in KZN to 17%. And the third party in the list and the second party in the coalition. So that's catastrophic. So for that party in that province, it's about survival. If you're being seen to throw your lot in with a party that doesn't have good on the ground structures and an organisation, then that could potentially scupper your chances of ever getting the province, getting any kind of position in the province again.
So much riding on it at the moment for the ANC. We'll see if the leadership
Indeed.
can in any way take some of these insights and these learnings. But Sean, I think we're gonna wrap up there. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground. So I think a very good discussion. And as I said, we'll have lots of follow-ups on this as things continue to develop into South Africa's next local government election. So Sean, on that note, thank you very much for your time, your insights, your research into all things domestic South African politics. To all of you, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, we invite you to become a CRA premium client. You can find more information at the link in the description below. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Centre for Risk Analysis. Take care.